Hello everyone, Mrs. Hosback here. I wanted to share some tips and tricks on adding some shadows to your cakes at home. My first tip is if you're working on adding some shadows at home, make sure each time you work to warm up with some value scale tornadoes. And this will help connect your brain with your hand and remember how hard you need to push to make light and dark values of your blue. My next tip for you is that if you run into trouble figuring out where to put your shadows, get some white objects out. White objects will show shadow the best, and get a flashlight out and stack them up and do your own little experimenting with putting your light source in different ways. You could even roll up paper towel or tissue paper to make it look like a layer of frosting and experiment around with where that light source is coming from, and it might help you to figure out where to put those shadows on your cake drawing. Another reminder for you is what we decided in class. We decided that all of our light sources would be coming somewhere from the right hand side of our paper. Some of you might choose to make it slightly behind the cake and down, or lower or higher, but everyone's light source is coming from the right. So the darkest part of our cake is going to be the left side. And that is why I'm starting with my shadow, the strongest, along the very left side of that cake. And you can see I'm pushing medium to hard, not the hardest yet. We're gonna save the hardest pressure of crayon for adding in those outlines where we really push hard to make those frosting details pop back out and look dimensional, or give it more three-dimensional qualities again. Right now, I'm treating the whole edge of that cake like one smooth surface, and I'm just kind of ignoring the fact that it has some frosting details for right now. And then you'll see how I go back in later with my hardest pressure of crayon and make those details stand back out. It's important that our shading looks really smooth and really gradual. So right now I'm going back through my shading and I'm looking for areas that look a little uneven, and I'm just trying to even it out and make it look a little bit smoother. A great way to check your own drawing is by holding it out with your arm extended and looking at it from a little bit further back. This will help you to find those areas that look a little bit uneven. Your next job is gonna be to do that same technique of pushing hard, medium hard, and gradually lightening up from the inside of the missing cake slice. So if your cake slice is missing off to the side more, you're only gonna have to do this on like that one surface, or if it's missing towards the middle of the cake more, you'll have to do it to the inside of both of those surfaces. And the one that's more blocked by light is going to be a little bit more of a darker dramatic shadow, and the one that's getting a little bit more light is going to be a little less dramatic of a shadow. Next, we can think about the top surface of the cake. So if there are any objects that stand up from the cake, like a candle or a shape, right next to the base of those objects, it's going to be the darkest shadow, and then it's going to gradually get lighter as it comes further away from that object. And then the actual object itself will have a shadow on it as well. Also, don't forget about that top edge of frosting. If there's anything that sticks up higher than the surface of the cake, that also will create a shadow onto the flat surface of the cake. Remember to add in the shadow from the cake blocking the light on the platter next to the cake. So think about that light source, and it's going to be the darkest on the opposite side of where the light is shining strongest. Earlier, I talked about how to add in some really dark outlines to our frosting details to make them stand back out. And this is what we're going to be using that very hardest pressure for. It's adding that dimension, that three-dimensional quality back to our frosting. When we shaded on top of it earlier, it started to look flat. So outlining it with the hardest pressure of crayon will make everything pop. We also want to add in some finishing touches on those objects on the top surface of the cake, along the edge if the frosting has a raised edge, adding that shadow along the edge. thinking about anywhere that there might be shadow and trying our best to really gradually add that in. As you can see, I'm trying to intensify the shadow next to that platter to make it a little darker, so I decided to add a little purple into the blue because the hardest pressure, the blue, wasn't looking quite dark enough for me. So if you find you need to do that, adding in a slightly darker blue or purple into your blue in certain areas to make your shadow really intense and really dark, that's fine. And then thinking about if your platter is raised up from the surface or is it setting on a tabletop, that's going to create different kinds of shadows. And then the final shadow you don't want to forget about is the shadow that the cake actually casts onto the plate. And it's going to be the darkest right at the base, right at the bottom edge of the cake where the cake touches the plate. And then that shadow would gradually get lighter as it comes away from the edge of that cake. So have fun experimenting. If you run into any trouble areas where you can't figure it out, you can always wait until we're together again and save those spots and we can talk about it in class. And hopefully you're ready for next time to add in the color of all of our cake and frosting and all of our details, and we can finish these up. Good luck and have fun.